Okay, I want to welcome you to our next session here on Bernie Sanders Issues on our special edition series of What the Flip. As always, I'll post this on my Facebook page, uh, What the Flip podcast. You can find it at facebook.com// What the Flip podcast. And today we're talking about climate change. And climate change is a large topic. And usually, in the past few sessions, what I've done is provided some historical context to help you kind of catch up. But we don't need to do that in this case because Bernie's done a great job of providing that context for us. So we're going to go straight into his issues webpage and just review those issues as they are right now. Uh, the Green New Deal. Now, this is really about climate change. That's where this is coming from. So let me cover Bernie's key points on this, and then we'll get into a little bit about why he feels this is important. Keep in mind here, this is a transformational concept. It's just not trying to reduce carbon. This is a full blown transformational process that we need to implement now, immediately, regardless of who's president, but we definitely need to implement now in order to protect our planet for our kids and for our grandkids and the people who come behind us. This is a responsibility we have as citizens. Living here on this planet is just not about satisfying our immediate needs. It's about making sure we have a responsibility to others who follow behind us that they are going to have a comfortable, reliable place to live in the future. So it's not just about carbon emissions. It has a lot to do with how we live on this planet as we grow in size. The number of us grow in size. Bernie is the only candidate, although several of them profess climate change. Bernie is the only one with an exceptional detailed plan that talks about transforming things. And it requires taking on oil companies and other large conglomerates who are making a large sum of money at the expense of the people on this planet. And that's their goal. Their goal is to continue to make more money for themselves and their organization. Our goal with Bernie here is to have a livable place for everyone. But as you will see, that doesn't mean that we have to give up things like jobs and the economy and income. And in fact, it's an opportunity, as we have in the past. We've moved through various transformational phases. We moved from the industrial society to the service society to the information technology society. So this isn't really something new that's happening in America. We've made these kind of transformational changes. This one just happens to be driven by the essence of an emergency. In other words, it's finite. We only have so much of this around us in the world. Air, for example, or water. These are finite issues, and if we continue to mess with them, we run into problems. So let's start with these. Some key points is to transform our energy system to 100% renewable energy and create 20 million jobs needed to solve the climate crisis. Okay, now there's creating the 20 million jobs, but there's also the potential loss of jobs, for example, in the fossil fuel industry. So there's plans to transition those people into these new jobs, as well as hire more people, because this transformational process requires a lot of changing. And that means a lot of people have to learn how to make that change happen, and then they have to do it. and then they have to maintain it over, the next 100 plus, or as long as we exist. So this is important to understand. So this is not a figure that's just pulled out of thin air. We will need these jobs to make this happen. Ensure a transition for communities and workers, including fossil fuel workers. And I just discussed that. Ensure justice for frontline communities, especially undersourced group communities like communities of color, Native Americans, people with disabilities, children, and elderly. There are ways to provide not just a change in the environment, but in change in how we live better in an environment in the future. And these changes have been neglected for the most part. These people are the people, for example, who don't have the resources. If energy goes out in your neighborhood and you're on oxygen, some people don't have the resources to change oxygen, or to keep their oxygen going, or to pay their light bills, or whatever that might be. We're going to save American families money with investment in weatherization, public transportation, modern infrastructure, and high speed broadband technology, which people now have become relying on broadband technology for emergency situation and hurricanes, or to communicate, even to communicate between families, to keep them from having to get on airplanes and go places, or get in automobiles and drive down. Um, we're also going to invest in we're going to commit to reducing emissions throughout the world, including $200 billion in the Green Climate Fund. We're joining the Paris Agreement, and reasserting the United States leadership in the global fight against climate change. In other words, we're not going to do all this by ourselves. It's important we engage the rest of the world in it, because we're not only affecting the rest of the world, they're affecting us and their behavior. So we have to step out in front, make a strong, fast, reliable, transformational change, and then prove that that change is what others need to do to follow us in order to improve the world. We're going to invest in conservation and public lands to heal our soils, forests, and prairie lands. So this is it. In this transformation is a restoration. It's sort of a rebirth. If we take, farmers always have known, if you take care of your land, it'll take care of you. But the rest of us haven't. We've chosen to either burn things down, like the Amazon forest, to build things that are permanent structures that don't allow those trees to regrow and redevelop. So we need to rethink how we're restoring ourselves in the future. And we have to end the greed of the fossil fuel industries and hold them accountable. And once again, capitalism is not just capitalism. Don't get me wrong. That's not capitalism in itself is not bad. Unethical capitalism, in other words, capitalism at the expense of others, really becomes the problem here. And we need to tackle that, and we need to stop it, because we grew on capitalism, and it helped build this country into what it is today, and that's a national leader. But many of those people were ethical. They treated their workers differently than they do today. They treated people in general differently. They had a concern about what they were doing as a company and how it impacted everyone and all that was around them, from the community on up. That has kind of fallen by the wayside into what I have termed, in a series I've done. You can find that on my YouTube channel, Victor L. Vogel, uh, unethical capitalism. Um, and really, what happens is ethical capitalism tends to incorporate socialism within its process. So you really don't have capitalism or socialism, you have ethical, uh, I guess, ethical growth, ethical opportunity, things that are focused on using the money, yes, to help those who decide and commit to doing those things. To make them they get a benefit, so individuals get a benefit out of this, but they also reinvest that into their workforce that helped them to get there, the communities that allowed them to get there, and the world in which they impact from whatever they do. So that's important. We keep that in mind from that side. So let's go into some details. I'm going to read this paragraph on details all the way through, and then we're just going to highlight some of these issues that are covered here. This is so you have some background, okay? And Bernie's done a pretty good job at defining this, so that's why I didn't feel like we needed to do that. All right, climate change. I'm gonna have some coffee as I talk here and some water to keep my throat from clogging up. Climate change is a global emergency. The Amazon rainforest is burning, Greenland's ice shelf is melting, and the Arctic is on fire. People across the country and the world are already experiencing the deadly consequences of our climate crisis as extreme weather events like heat waves, wildfires, droughts, floods, and hurricanes upend entire communities, ecosystems, economies, and ways of life, as well as endanger millions of lives. And I would add to that, animals who are important to our ecostructure. If you watch the news at all or paid attention, you've seen what the Australian fires have done to Australia as a nation. And this is just a segment of their country. Communities of color, working class people, and the global poor have borne and will bear this burden disproportionately. And they're impacted because of their inability to pay for things, their locations they live in, the conditions they live in. We've seen that with the earthquake, the hurricane in Puerto Rico, followed by the earthquakes recently in Puerto Rico. The scientific community is telling us in no uncertain terms that we have less than 11 years left to transform our energy system away from fossil fuels to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. If we're going to leave this planet healthy and habitable for ourselves, our children, grandchildren, and future generations, we've got to make these changes. As rising temperatures and extreme weather create health emergencies, drive land loss and displacement, destroy jobs, and threaten livelihoods, we must guarantee health care, housing, and good paying jobs to every American, and especially to those who have been historically excluded from that economic prosperity. The scope of the challenge ahead of us shares similarities with the crisis faced by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 1940s. And if you look at any kind of economy, I'm about to put out a, a post on Instagram on my What the Flip brought podcast, and it reviews the deficit in America. And you'll see that wars traditionally have driven our deficits up. Okay, so this example is an interesting example when I read it because I happen to be researching something not even affiliated with this. They really smacked home the idea of what can happen and how you have to transform. You just can't, fix it piecemeal. You have to leap in, uh, burn it all down and clean it all up and build it new to make it more effective where you need it to be. And so in 1940, battling a world war on two fronts, both the East and the West, the United States came together and within 3 short years restructured the entire economy in order to win the war and defeat fascism. This is a world war we were talking about, not a regionalized war like the Mideast. It's one where we felt the whole world was threatened. As President Bernie Sanders will boldly embrace the moral imperative of addressing the climate crisis and act immediately to mobilize millions of people across the country in support of the Green New Deal, from the Oval Office to the streets, Bernie will generate the political will necessary for a wholesale transformation of our society, with support from frontline and vulnerable communities of massive investments in sustainable energy, energy efficiency, and transformation of our transportation system. So here's the deal. I've dealt with transformations in corporations, okay? And when you first go in, people are scared to death. They don't want to change the status quo because that's their job that's at stake. But if it's allowed to remain, their job won't be there. That's so the transformation becomes necessary. But in that process, you have to have the sensitivity to help others see how they're going to be impacted in a way that's beneficial to them over time. Because they're afraid, they're fearful. You know, they've been trained to do something all their life a certain way. Now they're going to have to change it. This happened with the IT revolution, and we didn't transform this country to meet the IT revolution. And so, consequently, we dragged behind a lot of people who have not benefited from the IT revolution, who now show strong class structure differences. And here we have a chance, and here's a president of the future, Bernie Sanders, who is a forward thinker. He's saying, I know that's going to happen, so let's change it. Let's change it. Let's make it a transformation, and let's plan in all of those things we have to do to make sure no one's left behind, even those who are not at the forward leading idea generation of it, but the implementation of the program in the end, the worker, if you will, versus the creator, the worker who has to make all of this work. So we need a president who welcomes, who will fight the billionaire class, the fossil fuel executives, and those people who will fight to keep things stagnant because this is a threat to their livelihood. We need a president who welcomes their hatred, and Bernie will lead our country to enact this Green New Deal and bring the world together to defeat the existential threat of climate change. Now, I don't know that I go as far as saying we want to welcome their hatred. I think what we want to do is welcome them into the plan and use that resource and those expertises to turn their heads from what they know they're doing to what they could possibly do with all of their resources. So that combination of them plus us together will work fine. I think the problem is there again, the idea of change is difficult for people, and you have to go in a way that says we've got to make this change. We've got to convince them that it's worth more to them to make this change than it is to stick with what they're doing. And we can do that too. We can do that too. So that's one area that I think Bernie can improve on in terms of his issues. But from my standpoint, from my opinion, we don't need to isolate anybody in this world, particularly people who have vast resources who could benefit from this change in a way that would help everyone. So let's just cover a few of these key points now. Now we've got the details. As president, Bernie Sanders will arrive at climate catastrophe, avert climate catastrophe, excuse me, and create 20 million jobs. Okay, he's going to do that by reaching 100% of the renewable energy for electricity and transportation by no later than 2030 and complete decarbonization no later than 2050. Okay, so that simply means we have to start putting in places things that are going to replace fossil fuels. This is that simple. We've already begun to do that. And you'll see, I saw probably 6, 7 months ago, 8 months ago, I think the coal industry in West Virginia, for example, understands that what Trump was saying is he's going to bring back coal isn't going to happen. It's just not happening. And so, what they're doing now is those people who are in that industry are begging for funds to help them learn how to build solar panels and other things, windmills and things like that, and to become skilled in those jobs so they don't have to go 1,000 feet or more into the center of the earth to dig in dusty coal mines, but they are building steel towers and they're building solar panels and installing them. These people are the people we want to retrain. They're clamoring for this. They want their state to do this for them because even they see fossil fuel is not going to regenerate like Trump said it was. So, ending unemployment by creating 20 million jobs, we've already talked about the need. It's like the IT, there's shortage now. There's a large shortage in this industry of people who can do the basic work and make it happen. Not the executives, not the researchers, not the designers, but people who implement this, who make intranet work, who install the cables, who do the things that are necessary to make that happen. We need those kind of people in this business, and there are lots and lots of those jobs to be had once the commitment and the funds are committed and the transformation starts taking place. There'll be a lot of needs for jobs. We just have to start now getting people to understand what they have to do to make things happen in this area of renewed energy. Directly invest in a historic 16.3 billion trillion public investment towards all of these efforts and mobilization of resources. uh, we've got to go find all of this money and reallocate it. It's out there. By the way, all this money is out there. It's being spent on other things that probably aren't as important as this. And once we get our heads together and we know this plan is real and we're going to do it, everyone will be tasked with finding that money and putting it against the right resource. Okay. A just transition for workers. And this means that fossil fuel workers, we're going, what Bernie is saying here, and I'll read into this part because this is important. And if you're a fossil fuel, if you're in the oil industry, the natural gas industry, or the coal industry out there, you need to pay kind of attention to this. We will guarantee 5 years of a worker's current salary, housing assistance, job training, health care, pension support, and priority uh, job placement for any displaced worker, as well as early retirement support for those who choose to take that act instead of starting new action. So these are plans that when we put that team together, how can we put this educational system in place? How can we sustain and support until they can get up and learn the new job and into positions and begin to become self sustaining again? It's a transition of the workforce. It's a transition of the workforce into the new world without destroying their livelihood. Okay, so when you that's where things like Medicare for all and other places, when you integrate them into this as a total plan, you see how these programs become, they help each other push along a full transformation of our world towards helping everyone live a better life. Okay, we're going to declare climate change as a national emergency, and we need to do that. This needs to be seen strong enough that everybody believes we should do it. and there should not be any exceptions out there. Saving American families money by weatherizing and offering all kinds of incentives for putting panels on your house, to building different kinds of activities, electronic cars, providing benefits or sustenance or grants or whatever you want for doing these kinds of things, which will end up costing everybody less money to run. Your fuel prices, once you have a battery in the car and you have a self generating charger at your house, you basically eliminate gas and the fluctuation of gas prices. You eliminate utilities and the fluctuation of utilities. In fact, utilities in a lot of cases would end up being free, except for the maintenance cost associated with replacing solar panels and things like that. Supporting family farms by investing in ecological, regenerative, and sustainable agriculture. And now, this plan will transform our agriculture system to fight climate change and provide sustainable foods. Uh, and we'll cover this in a second a little bit more. Justice for frontline communities, especially under resourced communities, Native Americans, to recover from and prepare for climate impacts, to be able to have air conditioning, to be able to sustain heat, relocate if necessary, or provide housing that provides protection against heat or cold, drastic heat or cold changes, things like this, earthquake proof buildings, things like this. Commit to reducing emissions throughout the world. That everybody understands what's going on there, but we have to get the world involved in committing this program. That's why we want to generate to the Green Climate Fund so that we can participate as one of those leading countries. We need to participate more into this so that we can sort of guide and direct where that's going. Meeting and exceeding our fair share of global emission reductions, we need to take that action here in the United States. Making massive investments in research and development, and you can read all of these on your own later. I'm just trying to hit the high points. Uh, but we found some ways to there was a lot of research into lithium batteries for cell phones and for a lot of things like that, but also for automobiles and things like that. So that was no telling what the next person's going to come up with to help power our world without having to emit green gases into the climate. Expanding the climate justice movement. We will do this by coming together in truly inclusive movement that prioritizes young people, workers, indigenous people, communities of color, and other historically marginalized communities to take on the fossil fuel industry and polluters to push this over the finish line. In other words, we need everybody's support in a transformation, like in a company when the bosses decide, hey, we have to reinvent who we are and retransform how we're going to do business, and sometimes even change our product lines, transform our whole product. I mean, you can't just do that in leadership. You've got to embrace your whole workforce and help them understand why you're doing this, convince them to get behind you, motivate them to get engaged to that with that transformation. This is true in the country. We need everyone. And the people who are going to fight this battle on the front line, and it is a war, just like World War II is a war, are the younger people and the people who are now coming up of age into the world and the future people. We need to get them engaged at a far greater level than those of us who are retiring out of this process and either won't be involved in it as much, and all we can do is kind of support it. however we can. But those younger people are the people, and not just a few of the beneficial, but everybody in this country. Investing in conservation, investing in conservation of public lands to heal our soils, forests, and prairie lands. Every farmer out there knows if you treat your land well, it will treat you well back. They go to great lengths to protect their farmland, their soil, their what they plant, how they plant it, etc., when they plant it. It's only the massive agricultural conglomerates now that are less concerned about that, and they just move over and buy more property and destroy it. Everyday farmers, family farmers, people who spent their lives in farming, the heart of our farming society knew they had to protect their lands. And they go to great extents to do that. We need to provide processes that have a restoration of land and property involved in it. This plan will pay for itself in over 15 years. Experts have scored the plan, and it's economic, and you can see how it will do that by going down through all of this down here. You will make money by making the fossil fuel companies pay through litigation for what they've already done to us. In other words, it's a fine for creating all this. You benefited for years and years. Now you got to pay the piper. We're going to generate energy from wholesale or energy produced regional marketing authorities. That would be utility companies, or begin all of a sudden take some responsibility for protecting our earth. Scaling back military spending on maintaining global oil dependence. If we are energy green, we don't need oil from Saudi Arabia and other countries. Outside of the products that they develop, and there are plenty where they can still make money, like plastics and medicines and a lot of other stuff. But that dependence won't be as strong because we're not burning fuel. We're not surviving. We're not heating. We're not driving off of fuel sources. Okay. So consequently, we become less dependent on others. Collecting new income tax revenue from 20 million new jobs. Okay. So we put these other people into positions and we collect new jobs. Or we create new jobs. And from those new jobs, there will be a tax on you just like there is today. But the difference is your tax is paying for your future life. So there's another way to think about it. You're not going to be taxed more, but we'll have 20 million more people working. That's a lot more revenue generated into the system. Reduced need for federal and state safety spending due to creating millions of good paying unionized jobs and making the wealthy and large corporations pay their fair share in this process. So, as always, where Bernie's it's now time for corporations to become ethical capitalists and start reinvesting in the things that allow them to continue to make their money. They can benefit from this. They can benefit from this too. So the cost of inaction is unacceptable. Economists estimate that if we do not take action, we'll lose about 34.5 trillion in economic activity at the end of the century. And the benefits are enormous. By taking a bold and decisive transformational action, we will save $2.9 trillion over 10 years, 21 over 30 years, 70 over 80 years. We just can't afford not to do this. It's important that we energize and get everybody involved in a full transformation. You cannot do this piecemeal. I've listened to Bernie Sanders, I've listened to Klobuchar, I've listened to all of them, and they all have the same old basic song that you hear every time out of politicians. Let's take this, let's negotiate it, let's piecemeal it. You know, corporations that are struggling, about to go under, they don't piecemeal it. They hire a consulting team, they come in and analyze things, and they just tear it apart and regenerate the company and into something new and different. They transform it. They transform it so that it can become healthy again, and you experience growth again. It's the same thing. If you have a heart attack, you don't go in and say, let's put a band-aid on the heart and see how it goes. You go in and you do heart surgery and you transform that heart into something else, and then it can keep you alive. In some cases, you transplant it. That is a transformation for life. That's kind of where we are as a country. Our heart is worn out. It needs we need a new heart. And that's a transformation. It's not a gradual change or piecemeal this, piecemeal that. It's a massive need for a new life in this country. We need to regenerate our country and transform it into something different, and particularly in this area of climate change. Okay, we're going to transform our energy system to 100% renewable energy and create 20 million jobs. And this is, if you go down here, we're going to transform the energy system away from fossil fuels. We're going to build enough renewable energy generation capacity. Uh, we will end greed of the energy system. It's going to be one that benefits all, not just a few. Build a modern, smart grid that's important, that can be protected, will operate, will be defensible. Weatherize homes and businesses to perform energy efficient upgrades to buildings, not just energy efficient, but also things that will protect against earthquakes and hurricanes and floods and other things. Electricity homes, electrify homes and businesses, move away from things that can explode and destroy your household. I've always worried about gas for that reason. Phase out the use of non sustainable resources, regulate all dangerous greenhouse gases, and declare a climate emergency. These are things we have to do, that those 20 million people are going to help us do to make happen. Then we got to attack transportation. Okay. And for that, we got to fully electrify and decarbonize our transportation sector. That's all vehicles, buses. Think about buses, trains, planes, everything has to be somehow moved off of carbonization and into energy that is electric or some other source that hasn't been discovered yet, but doesn't pollute the world. And we've got to issue grants that allow people to purchase these new items, vehicle trade-in programs. We got a electric vehicle charging infrastructure, grids that will allow it to operate the same way gas stations do today. So all your meta markets are going to move from selling gas to go ahead and plug it in. Electrical VR. So we will build that. You got to have school and transit bus systems, and government buildings, and office buildings, and all these places need to convert over to solar or electric energy that can be sustainable through things like windmill farms and stuff like that, and whatever else people are going to come up with. Replace all shipping trucks. So, all this transportation that's going back and forth, delivering our products and goods, will be modernized to do that. Ensure decarbonization of transportation sector. Build public transit that is affordable, accessible, fast, and resilient. And that will then take people off the road. If it can be safe, it can be all those things, and you can get on a bus and go somewhere, or a train and go somewhere, and it's electric. You don't have all that carbon going out of there, but people are not just jumping individually in a car and going somewhere, but they have that available to them, but that would be electric also. Build regional high-speed rail systems that get you from one place to the other comfortably and safe without emissions. Retrofit dangerous fossil fuel structure infrastructure. That's uh, in 2013, 800,000 gallons of crude oil spilled in railroad accidents. 800,000 gallons. 2014, an average of one oil train derailed every day. The Federal Railroad System cannot support this kind of stuff. So we need to go into research and development. What are we going to do there? Dramatically decrease the cost of energy storage. We're going to invest in decarbonizing the shipping and aviation industries. That's a big deal. There's a lot of jobs right there. Establish a nationwide materials recycling program that figures out how to regenerate energy through our waste. That would be a big, big job creator right there, and a lot of innovation and research can go into that. Reassert U.S. leadership in research and engineering by marshaling resources across the federal government and the institutions of higher education, including National Academy of Engineering, National Science Foundation. We can bring in people to figure out how to make all this work. They figured out how to make cell phones. They figured out the internet. They figured out all this other stuff. Let you as a government, you don't tell people what to do. You don't restrict them. You don't put regulations. You engage them. You partner with them. Then they can help us get there. As long as we know what they're doing, they can generate all the revenue they can possibly generate through research and development, as long as we know that what they're regenerating is beneficial for everyone. What a hell of a capitalistic idea that would be. Use the power of international leadership. In this case, we're going to lead the world in fighting climate change by investing. This is where you can't just do what everybody else is doing, and that's piecemeal. It's, oh, we're going to stop this. We got a little bit of saving. You need to go in with a full, reinventive, transformational process, and then show the rest of the world that need to come along. That's the leadership role we need to play. You need to be the first out of the gate. Invest in the Green Climate Fund, which helps everyone pay for their stuff. And yes, we're paying a little more than everybody else, but we make a lot more than everybody else. And the best, and it's not just giving them money, it's reinvesting. It's making sure that we have provided them the direction they need to follow us into that role. Bring together the leaders of the major industrialized nations, and if if anything could bring peace and unity to the world, this is probably it. Survival of your masses. Rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement. That's just a good thing to do. That's the same thing as getting everybody involved and getting us back into a leadership role in this area. Renegotiate disastrous trade deals to protect our environment. So, not only have agreements like NAFTA and the permanent normal trade relations with China outsource millions of American jobs, they've allowed corporations to outsource their pollution. So, what's happening is we have American companies over getting filthy rich while they're allowed, because they're allowed to pollute in China, but they're not in the United States. So we got to stop that. We got to stop all that. End overseas fossil fuel financing. In other words, we don't need to be investing anymore. We need to, in fact, withdraw all investments out of fossil fuels over a period of time. I mean, you can't do this tomorrow, but over a period of time, we need everybody to be clear. We won't be invested anymore in your fossil oil wells in various areas in the Arctic, in the oceans, and those kinds of things. We need to invest in resilience and justice. How do we do? Create a climate justice resiliency fund will ensure infrastructure and communities are protected from unavoidable impacts of climate. So this fund is designed to protect, for example, coastal cities and communities are going to be affected by high rising oceans, or areas that have strong weather changes like Tornado Alley in Oklahoma, places like that. Rebuild as America's crumbling infrastructure. My gosh. And so, it might be good we haven't done a lot of infrastructure yet, because we need to engage in making sure the infrastructure change fits the climate change transformation. So we may be building different kinds of rail systems. We may be building different kinds of roads with different things in them, like electronics, etc., that will help self-guiding electric-powered vehicles. So infrastructure, in many ways, not having become involved in that, in my opinion, might be more beneficial to us, because if this transformation process happens, then we need our infrastructure to be aligned with it. We need to repair the nation's water systems. The thing that we need more in life than anything is water, and it is a finite amount of water we have in the world. We've got to learn to manage it better and to protect it better. So these are all the things down here that Bernie has talked about relative to water. We got to build resilient, affordable, public-owned broadband infrastructure system that people, or everyone has access to, not just a few people where the most money can be made out of it. So that needs to just be taken out of AT&T's hands and all these other companies. And yes, we need to control it so that it's managed in the best interest of everyone in America, not just a few, and not aligned with whoever's individual thinking they would like to have, like Mark Zuckerberg. Increase funding for roads, repair, freight, and passenger transportation networks. Build 7.4 million affordable housing units to close the affordable housing gap across the country, so that people aren't living in the streets. We can get them out of the streets into affordable, safe housing that is reasonably priced, and modernize these to fit the new need and safety standards for environmental. Retrofit our public infrastructure to withstand climate impacts, adapt to sea level rise, increase funding for firefighting to deal with more frequent and severe wildfires. There's a tremendous amount we can do there. Protect community cohesion, increase investment in hazard mitigation grant programs to ensure communities that are rebuilt after disasters have uh, disaster strike, have necessary resources to build back stronger and better and protect against future disasters. We got it. This one is very important. We got to conserve our public lands, achieve aggressive emission reductions for the forest sector, and invest in green infrastructure and public lands conservation by reinvesting in the civilian conservation system. Fully fund the land and water conservation for 50 years. As we need to make sure all of this is rebuilt, restructured, and handled in a way that's safe and provides access to everyone who needs water. End our national park maintenance backlog. National parks and park rangers help educate the public about the need to protect wild spaces, sequester carbon by protecting wilderness, and conserves historical, cultural, and natural resources. This is part of who we are. This is our culture. This is important that we stop this destruction of these areas for fossil fuel development. End the greed of the fossil fuel industry and hold them accountable. Basically, we're going to prosecute them and make them pay for what they've created. And that's a fine. Okay, it's a fine. And before you get all upset about that, understand these people can afford it. They can afford the fine we're going to be charging them. More importantly, we want to motivate them to move the other direction and partner with us in the renewable energy sector the same way they did, and creating all of these extremely technical and high tech inventions they had to pull oil out of our ground. We need them to put that same energy into renewable energy and green energy, and to put those resources in there so they don't have to go broke. They can be part of those 20 million jobs. Create a national climate risk report, implement sanctions for corporations that violate climate change, end fossil fuel subsidies, keep fossil fuels public lands on the ground, ban offshore drilling, end all new federal fossil fuel infrastructure permits, require fossil fuel corporations repair leaking in infrastructure. Now, you understand that we are talking about renewable energy, but much of what fossil fuel delivers is the plastic that goes into your phones and around your phones, and the silicon that goes into your uh, uh, chips and things. I mean, there's a lot of things that fossil fuel does outside of drive cars and heat your house. Okay. So we will continue to need some fossil fuel, but we need to regulate how it's done so that it's done in line with not creating carbons, you know, those kinds of things. So we need to ban fracking and mountaintop removal from coal mining, ban imports and exports of fossil fuels. All of these two things, the mountaintop removal and fracking, are things that simply improve the cost effectiveness and the allowing of more mass production of fuels, fossil fuels. So uh, we're not going to want fossil fuels, so they need to figure out something else they can do on the green energy side that can replace the revenue associated with this. And if they're smart, they're going to end up going that they need to be thinking about doing that right now anyway. Divest federal pension funds from fossil fuels, pressure financial institutions, universities, insurance corporations, and large institutional investors still invested in fossil fuels to transition those investments to clean energies. So there is going, and that will be done most likely for eliminating incentives or restructuring incentives to make this happen. Place a fee on imported carbon pollutions. We don't want people in the world producing carbon, so we want to implement a lot of these same processes around the world. We want other companies do it, following our lead. Accurately estimate the climate impacts of benefits of all legislation proposed in Congress. Focus on the federal government's resource on transitioning 100% clean fuel. Now, we're going to rebuild our economy, ensure justice for frontline communities, and a just transition. Uh, Workers are going to be taken care of in this process, and up to 5 years of wages guaranteed, job placement assistance, relocation assistance, health care, and pension based on their previous salary. So you can see how his educational program and also Medicare for All tie into this. What's really neat about Bernie's plan is it's a highly integrated, full transformational plan to reinvent our country into a more healthier, less dangerous country, democracy. And if we can do this, then we will be the envy of the world. There's no question about it. We're going to require strong labor standards, provide employers tax credit, and incentivize hiring for transitioning employees. We're going to invest in workers and deindustrialize communities, economic development. We're going to protect the right of all workers to form a union without threat of intimidation management. Unions over the years, I used to be against them when I was employed, but actually because of the corruption. But there's less of that today than there used to be, and within this, there is a need for workers to feel like, and there was for a long time years ago, right after World War II on, there were times where companies took care of their employees, and unions actually became less relevant in the process. They didn't need to protect as much, but if they did, they certainly had the right to. Economic development, uh, 2.53 billion for Appalachian Regional Commission, 506 million for the Delta Regional Authority. So basically, this is placing money where we need for the transition to create economic growth in various parts of the country and providing them the resources to help start doing that. A just transition for frontline, there is no doubt that the poor and marginalized suffer the impacts of pollution and climate disruption, particularly communities of color. They are the front lines of the climate emergency. For example, of the 73 waste burning incendiaries across the United States, an astounding 79% are located within 3 miles of low income and minority neighborhoods, which are exposed to mercury, lead, and soot. The Green Deal is not only a serious climate plan, but an opportunity to uproot historical injustices and inequities. So Bernie has a plan to ensure all-inclusive, comprehensive process from start to finish, follow environmental justice principles, ensure the full equal enforcement of environmental, civil rights, and public health laws, ensure Green New Deal jobs and job training resources are made available, focus training and local hiring, to reflect the radical and gender diversity of the community, update permitting rules that allow polluters to target poor communities, ensure that all agencies aid by executive order, and extend the civil rights protections to ensure all civil rights courts, and you can go on and read down through this as we go through the process. We're going to empower farmers, foresters, and ranchers to adjust climate change and address the ecosystem. And really, this, we're getting close to time here. This really talks about how they're going to help farmers, pay farmers to keep carbon in the soil, research and development, fund farmland conservation. What this is going to do is going to provide opportunities for that small farmer to get in there and develop. Now, in addition to whatever conglomerates still survive the transformation, we should see a massive increase in local farming again. And this is important to sustain our food and water systems around the world. We just have to have more localized farming involved, and let the family farmers develop as they always have. They have the skill sets, they have the know how. But this is a big segment. So if you're out there and you're a farmer and listen to me this, and your family farm is in jeopardy or you've lost your family farm, there may be opportunities by putting Bernie into the presidency to regain the business that you had, to reinvest in farming and make that happen. So all of these things are basically things uh, that Bernie intends to do. He is a full transformational person. He is someone who is going to uh, really get in and make it happen. Now, this all sounds like there's a whole bunch of government regulation, but it does not have to be that way. There are ways to create systems that allow this to happen by partnering with existing corporations. So, this is a big part of what can happen in a transformation. So much is possible because the energy just continues to magnify as you see the benefits evolve. It's just that simple. Transformations do work. They are uh, radical kinds of things to do, but they do work. And they, everyone I've been involved in ended up being beneficial to the organization. So I believe this will be beneficial to the country, our organization. And keep in mind, we own the country, folks. We pay a lot of money to this country every year, and we deserve to live healthy. We deserve to have security. We deserve not to be have climate changes that can, start creating things to be extinct, like in Australia. Uh, we need to wake up and see the truth. Uh, the first the first process in every major uh, change and transformation, and the ability to get people to evaluate and see change, is the assessment of your current state. And our current state is dangerous. We have increased hurricanes, we have increased volcanoes, we have increased fires, we have increased severe weather hitting, whether it's cold or hot. All of this is, stuff we want to stop or mitigate, or at least reduce. That's clear. There should be no question we need to make the change. The question is, are we going to try to do it piecemeal, bit by bit by bit, which we've been doing for the last 50 years? And I haven't seen anything change effectively. Okay. We need someone who steps in and makes a transformational change and will muster the support to make that happen. And, you know, as someone once said, why not try that? Everything else isn't working. And certainly Trump hasn't done anything. I mean, there's a man that said he was going to transform. He didn't have the skill sets, the ability, the knowledge to transform. He doesn't have the leadership to transform. In fact, it's kind of taken us the other way. And that's what we thought we were going to get when people put him in there. I didn't put him in there, but when people put him in there. Well, you didn't get it. So, what do you got to lose? We certainly don't want to go back where we were, where we tried to do everything a little bit at a time, piecemeal. I'm not big about compromise. Compromise is a lose lose world. That's where both people have to give up something, you progress slowly. Synergy, excitement, where you put everybody together in the room that has a stake in it, and you make them fight it out and come out until they all agree on something. And that something usually is better than anything any of them would have come up with. That's transformational. That's what Bernie can do. That's what we can do with the transformational system. Okay, uh, so there. I hope this gives you some insight as to Bernie. These are long. They're worth the investment to listen to. They're worth the investment to go back to berniesanders.com /issues and read all of them yourself again, and ask yourself, do I want to continue to go down a path we're going, which is a path towards destruction and bad water and all of the stuff that goes on in the world that we're feeling right now, or do we want to change it? And we can't change it. I mean, all of us can change it. We can help by, recycling and stuff like that. But those are minuscule things. Those are minuscule things. The things that are destroying us are the massive things. The oil and gas industry and the carbon pollution and the coal industry and all of those kinds of things that people are generating simply to generate revenue. Okay. Uh, they get controlled by money. Those things are the things that are going to take us to disaster. And so we can't piecemeal it anymore. Sorry, we don't have time. We don't have time to piecemeal it anymore. Think about it that way. You only have so much time, and your time is being eaten up quickly by these little we're going to piecemeal it together, make this work, make that, we're going to compromise it. No, we need to regenerate and transform into something that we are not, and get it there quickly and get it on the ball and see the positive change. If that fails, hey, you can go back to piecemealing it if you want, but I'd give that 4 to 8 years, and I think you're going to see a big difference. This is What the Flip podcast, the series on Bernie Sanders issues, because you don't hear these things in speeches, you don't hear them in sound bites, you don't hear them on TV, interviews, you don't even hear them in debates anymore. You don't have time. They don't allow you to dig in and understand and think through things like this. That's why I do these 1 hour type, a little longer than 1 hour sessions. Have a great day. I think it's time you vote for transformation. There's only one guy that has all of that together. No other candidate does. That's Bernie. All right, till next time, we'll do another one of these come Friday. And so hopefully they're helpful to you. Have a great day.
You can like my Facebook page, What the Flip, and follow me. And stay tuned for more broadcasts of this podcast, What the Flip. Until then, have a great day.